Welcome back to week 6 of the masterclass. I wanted to start with this Ayurvedic proverb that we started in week number 1 with. If diet is wrong, medication is of no use. If diet is correct, medication is of no need. And this is so true, and who wants to be dependent on medication to begin with? And it really is that simple. If you feed your body with nutrients that it needs to be able to function and stay healthy, then medication is of no need. I am Kara Joseph, a whole foods nutritionist, and tonight we're going to be talking about food sensitivities and food combining. So first, let's recap from all the past weeks, and I want you to get out your diet log. And let's review the diet log and see where everybody is with that. So hopefully you've got your diet log with you. If you haven't, go find it. I'll give you a second and grab some kind of writing tool, pencil, pen, crayon, whatever you got handy. And I want you to look at your log, and hopefully everybody won't be writing, but if you're still on step number 1, removing sugar, circle any obvious sugars that you have on your diet log. So that would be like sugar in your coffee or tea, soda, fruit juice, any kind of actual fruit, like cookies, baked goods, all that kind of stuff. So give that a circle anywhere that you see that from this past week. And then reducing carbohydrates. So remember, everybody has a different goal. Your ultimate goal is a half a cup of refined carbohydrates per day. And this does not include fruits and vegetables. This is usually packaged stuff like pasta, crackers, any kind of rice, any chips, pretzels, all that kind of stuff. So if you have made it to a half a cup per day, hopefully you are starting to switch over to healthier carbohydrates like buckwheat, quinoa, and brown rice. And then give yourself a star for every single day that you accomplish eating 6 half-cup servings of vegetables every day. The closer to raw those vegetables are, the more benefit you're going to be getting out of those, so that you should get an extra star if half of those are raw. And then 3 to 5 palm-sized servings of animal protein, or more animal than plant protein, but 3 to 5 palm-sized servings of protein. So remember, a palm-sized serving of protein is about 20 grams. If you're a 120-pound person, you should be eating 3 pounds a day. You should not be measuring food. There should be an eyeball for all the things that you're eating, even the carbohydrates. You want this to be easy and sustainable. All right, you're drinking a half your body weight in ounces every day. Exercising 15 to 20 minutes every day. That's just moving your body. You don't need to join a gym. You don't need to change your clothes. You don't even need sneakers. Just move your body around for 15 to 20 minutes. Start buying organic food or from local sources that you know are using organic practices when possible. Write down what you're eating, so that's what you should be looking at right now. Track your progress. You can either track this right on your diet log or through an app that you have on your phone. Shop without a list and cook without a recipe. Remember, these are optional, so if you have some other kind of routine that's working well for you, stick with that system. Don't try to recreate the wheel. But if you do have a hard time getting recipes together or your list for the market, definitely try to go to the market and just see what's available. Just like I did tonight, I went into my refrigerator and said, okay, I have some onions, I have some kielbasa, I got some cabbage and peppers and sweet potatoes. And dinner was done. No planning necessary. All right, tonight we're going to be talking about food sensitivities, and food sensitivities fall into a category, what I call stressors. So this often is the missing piece to your health problems and challenges. And if you have checked off all of the boxes on your goal sheet, you've gotten rid of sugar, you've cut down on the carbohydrates, you're eating all the vegetables, you're drinking all the water, check, 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 and you're still got some issues that you would really like to address, they haven't completely resolved, or maybe you have a current disease state that you would like to improve. Working on these stressors is really important. And it may not necessarily be part of a whole foods diet, but it certainly is part of this mindset of healing your body naturally using nutrition. So nutrition is going to feed your body the nutrients that it needs. And this is the idea of this is removing things that are actually causing stressors to your body. So things like toxins, heavy metals, any kind of problematic foods. So that's where we are going to be talking about tonight, and that's what does fall into the whole foods diet. Problematic foods and food sensitivity. Any kind of immune challenges. So if you have some kind of lingering viral infection, bacterial infection, parasites, all of these things would be immune challenges that you want to address and get out of your body. And then energetic pathways. So energetic pathways take several different forms. When I'm working with clients, I'm looking for scars on the body's surface that is actually impairing the energetic flow of energy on your body's skin that can impair your health. And then past memories or emotions. And those can often impact your health significantly. And we're going to be talking later tonight about emotional eating and why we often eat poorly, and that can play into that as well. And then things like clearing your chakras and working with an energy worker to do those types of things can often bring you to the next level of health that you're looking for. So tonight we're going to be talking about food sensitivity. The top 5 big guys are dairy, eggs, gluten, corn, and soy. Why do food sensitivities happen? So we end up being sensitive to the protein in those foods. Sensitivity, that's not an allergic reaction. That's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about foods that don't cause an allergic reaction per se, but do cause problems in your body that do affect your health. And so these proteins in these foods are difficult to digest to begin with. So I'm going to use gluten, for example. The protein in gluten is hard for us to digest and naturally causes inflammation within the GI tract and systemically throughout the rest of the body because it's difficult for humans to digest. So that's point number 1. But interestingly, all of the big guys on that list of 5 are all linked back to GMO and pesticide use. So 50 years ago, even when I was a kid back in the 70s, these food sensitivities were not as rampant as they are now. It seems like every kid you meet has got some kind of gluten, dairy, corn, some kind of sensitivity somewhere that they're trying to avoid. And this is because of the GMO pesticide use that we have used throughout the world. And even things like eggs, you might think, well, eggs aren't a GMO food. That is correct, but the chickens are fed GMO soy feed, making the egg a GMO product, which is so sneaky because you think you're feeding yourself something healthy, and you're really not. And what happens is it creates gut permeability and an immune response to the food. So if you look at this slide here, on the left side, you have a normal tight junction on the cellular level in your intestinal lining. And that's what you want because your GI tract is the first defense against any kind of foreign invaders like germs, parasites. You certainly don't want those guys going internally. You just want them to go through the GI tract and have the body take care of them and eliminate them at that point. And then any kind of foods so we're talking about a cellular level. We're not talking about a piece of bread floating through your bloodstream. We're talking about the cellular components of these things. And what happens is initially the food creates inflammation within the gut because they're hard to digest. And if they're GMO and they've been sprayed with any kind of pesticide, then they're going to create more permeability, inflammation, and the cellular junctures actually start to pull apart because of the chronic inflammation. And then we get cellular debris coming through those junctures that shouldn't happen. And the body says, hey, this stuff is in the wrong place. We're going to create our defense against them and create antibodies. And you end up creating an antibody against a type of food like milk, eggs, or soy. And then every time you eat this stuff, you have this immune response, and the first response in immunity is inflammation. And typically you want that to be happening, but in this case, it's a mismatch. You obviously don't want to become inflamed every time you're eating bread. And so we want to eliminate this stuff from our diet if we can. How on earth can you figure out if you have a food sensitivity to begin with? So there's 3 different ways to do this. The first one is the simplest and sometimes really the most effective, and that's using your intuition and elimination. So many people that I see in the office, they already know that they're sensitive to whatever food. Usually it's something like dairy or gluten, and they say, yeah, I think I am, but I'm not sure. And maybe they haven't really owned up to the fact that they're having a problem with it because they don't really want to take it out of their diet. And anyway, so there's probably on some level, you probably already know what foods you're sensitive to. And so if you have an idea that maybe you are sensitive to a particular food, and it might not be one of the foods on the top 5 list, it might be another food, eliminate it from your diet for the next month. It takes several weeks for some of these foods to actually fully flush out of your body. Like dairy takes 2 weeks. So even if you're sensitive to dairy, even eating dairy on occasion can give you problems depending on your level of sensitivity. And so eliminate this stuff from your diet for a whole month. Just one thing at a time though. So pick the top offender. And then you can test out the waters after a month and try it and see if it gives you any trouble. All right, the next way that you can do it is muscle testing. So this is what I do in the office and use to determine what kind of nutrients and targeted clinical nutrition that we're going to be doing. But it's very simple. If you hold out your arm, I push on your arm, you should be able to hold your arm nice and strong. But then if I give you a food that you are sensitive to, or your body just says, hey, I have a hard time handling that. If I give you a vial of, let's say, eggs, and I push on your arm will go weak because your body's saying, hey, I'm affected by this stuff. So we figure that out through muscle testing at the office, and then lab work. So IgG antibodies is what you're looking for if you're doing lab work. That's going to show you what you're sensitive to. IgE is the antibody test for actual allergy testing. And you probably at this point already know what foods you're allergic to, which is a different level of reaction. So it's the IgG antibodies that you're looking for. But if you haven't checked off everything on the whole food goal list, I would not spend the money on the IgG antibody test. These tests are anywhere from $150 to several $100. Obviously, if you get it ordered through your physician, sometimes insurance pays for it, but not all the time. And if you're still eating a lot of foods that are causing gut inflammation and permeability, you're going to have a huge laundry list of foods that you're sensitive to, and it's going to be super overwhelming. And in the end, when you're eating super clean, there may be only 1 or 2 foods that you're actually truly sensitive to. And then, can you still be intolerant without having a positive IgG antibody test? Absolutely. So there is the other part of it. So you can have all this fancy lab work done, but still suspect that you're sensitive to, let's say, dairy, and you are more than likely right. So you may not see it on your lab test, but you're still intolerant to it. All right, common reactions. So what would be the reactions that you might be seeing if you have a food sensitivity and you're eating a food in your diet that your body doesn't really like? The most common are going to be digestive and skin issues. So things like bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, IBS. All of these things can be from offending foods. But remember too, before you start going crazy and eliminating a bunch of foods from your diet, make sure that you're eating super clean. So you've checked off all the boxes on your goal sheet for this whole foods class. You're eating organic foods. You're not eating any kind of GMOs. And you may find that you don't have any food sensitivities at all after you do all that stuff. And skin sensitivities, things like rashes, eczema, asthma. So this is one that it doesn't really trigger with most people, but the foods are causing inflammation, and they're not just causing inflammation in your GI tract, but they're causing inflammation in your entire body. So that's in your respiratory system as well, creating inflammation and asthma because you have just a lower threshold for triggers, and it will create that asthmatic attack. Elevated heart rate. So this is so interesting. If you are eating foods that you are sensitive to or allergic to, you will have an increased heart rate. So this is kind of a fun way to test it out. Check your heart rate, have a piece of bread with some gluten in it, check your heart rate again. If it's elevated by around 10 points, then you're more than likely sensitive to that food. Aches and pains, so that's again back to that inflammation in your joints, and you just kind of feel stiff and not as good as you'd like to feel. That could be from a food sensitivity. And then general things like irritability, brain fog, depression, fatigue, all of these things can be from foods that you shouldn't be eating that your body does not like. So once you've figured out, okay, I'm sensitive to whatever food, you go to the market and you start looking for things like gluten-free foods, dairy-free foods, vegan foods because they wouldn't have dairy or eggs in them. So if you have a problem with either one of those things, then vegan is, what you're going to be looking for. But the problem is that most of these foods, as we talked about in the gluten-free baking class, have got some kind of GMO component to it, do have pesticides in them, and are often what I call frankenfoods. These are not even real foods, and you're better off staying away from them. So don't be tricked. Just because it's gluten-free does not mean that cupcake or those chips are good for you. Substitution. So what do you do now? You figured out that you have a food sensitivity. What's next? How do you stay away from the frankenfoods but still eat food? And so dairy, the best substitute for dairy are nut milk. Things like almond milk, cashew milk, coconut milk. These are all great substitutions. Soy milk I would avoid just because of the contamination of soy. And you can make your own milk, the nut milk, and just go online on how to make it. It's super, super easy. You just soak the nuts overnight in water, blend them up with some water in a blender, squeeze them out through a nut bag, and you're done. It takes about 10 minutes minus the time that you're using for soaking. Look on the ingredient list for nut milk, so you've got to be careful that there's no added sugar or any other kind of preservatives in the nut milk. So you want a super clean nut milk. Nuts, salt, and water would probably be ideal. And it's not always, you can't always find it that clean, but get as clean as fast as you can. And definitely no sugar. All right, eggs. What do you do with eggs? Obviously, if you're sensitive to eggs, now sometimes people are sensitive to just the egg white or just the egg yolk, and that's a happy day because you can eat things like omelets and quiches and all that stuff still. But if you're sensitive to both the egg white and the egg yolk, then you have to avoid it altogether. So obviously you can't be eating a straight egg, but you can use an egg substitute when you're baking. So my favorite is a flaxmeal egg. Super easy. You just take a tablespoon of flaxmeal, put it in 3 tablespoons of water, let it sit for about a minute, and it's going to get gelatinous. And then you add it in, so that would equal 1 egg. So however many eggs you need for whatever you're cooking. It works great for any kind of baked good, muffins, waffles. It does not work good, obviously, for anything that the major component is eggs, like souffle. All right, gluten. If you're sensitive to gluten, that would be things like wheat, rye, barley, spelt. use the gluten-free flour mix that we learned about in the gluten-free baking class. And then if you're allergic to soy, you definitely need to avoid things like tofu and edamame beans. But if you love soy sauce, the alternative would be coconut aminos. The coconut aminos do have some sugar in them, but the trade-off is that you're not eating something that you're sensitive to. All right, so food combining and food gut reconditioning. So this is just the next level of whole foods eating that you could consider if you have a digestive issue, if you've checked off every single box on that goal sheet and you are still having problems, and if you have a current disease process or you're concerned about maybe you have a family history of colon cancer and you want to try to avoid that. This would bring you to the gold level of eating and obviously where we all want to be with super great health. The reason why this type of eating and food combining is important is because it rests the digestive system. It doesn't overwork it, causing damage to your digestive tract. And if you have any kind of digestive disorders, it allows your GI tract to heal. So inside your body, it's the same as outside. If you get a cut in your hand and you're constantly washing your hands, you're constantly knocking that cut, you're constantly reopening it, it never ever heals. And your GI tract is the same way. If you're constantly eating bad food choices or foods that you're sensitive to, it's always inflamed, it's always irritated, and you never get a time to heal. So this type of eating is super important, and we'll get to that in a second on what exactly that is. And then it balances blood chemistry. So for anybody, for your overall health and longevity and vitality, this is so important. So blood labs are important, and they do give us a window into what's happening in the body. But it's important to understand that your body will sacrifice nutrients and balance of all things for the bloodstream itself to keep the right osmotic pressure. So you could have a good calcium level in your blood lab, but you have an incredibly poor calcium availability and storing and absorption in your body because of what you're eating, and it's throwing your body's chemistry off. So I don't like to think about blood chemistry. I like to think more about your body chemistry and what's happening beyond just the bloodstream, because the bloodstream is always going to compensate at the expense of the rest of the body. And so this is really important to understand things like pH balance. We know that is so important with things like cancer and chronic disease, and you want to get a good pH balance. And this diet is going to give that to you. So once you've done all the check boxes in that goal list, the next step would be going to the phase 1 gut reconditioning program. This is based off of the Page diet from Dr. Melvin Page, who did research decades ago on whole foods and looked at people's blood labs and found that this was the best to balance their blood chemistry and gave them the best outcomes using junk food. All right, so phase 1, you're basically eating proteins and vegetables. It's really easy. Don't make this harder than it is. So many people say, well, what can I eat? Protein and vegetables, so any kind of animal protein except for pork. And then you also want to eliminate dairy, soy, and beans. So you can eat beef, you can eat fish, you can eat chicken, you can eat eggs, you can eat duck, you can eat boar. All of those animal proteins are up for grabs. And any kind of vegetables except corn and potatoes in phase 1. Any nuts are also acceptable except peanuts. And then any kind of healthy fat, butter, olive oil, coconut oil, sesame oil, any of those fats that we discussed in the fats class would be acceptable. And then you want to eat your food as close to raw as possible. So that goes for fruits and vegetables. And then no flours, grains, sugars, or sugar substitutes on phase 1, and that would last for approximately 3 weeks. At the end of 3 weeks, you should feel significantly better, especially if you're doing this for gut health and you do have digestive issues. Phase 2 is maintenance, and this is where you're eating proteins from animal sources, but now you can also incorporate other non-animal sources, and raw dairy is okay as well, just in moderation. You don't want to make it the bulk of the protein that you're eating. So a couple times a week, if you have beans and rice for dinner, or you like to have tofu, that would be fine. But the majority of what you're eating should be from animal sources. Vegetables, all vegetables are okay, and try to eat them more towards their raw state at least half the time if you can. So that just means a lot of salads, which is so easy and delicious, and there's so many different options there. Fruit is okay here, which is not okay in phase 1. And then any healthy grains. So now you're bringing back in healthy grains. Half a cup per day would be ideal. Things like buckwheat, brown rice, wild rice, quinoa, and oatmeal are all excellent choices because they do have some level of nutrients in them. All right, nuts are really great. Fats as well, any kind of healthy fat. No sugar or sugar substitutes, obviously that's out for good, and for good reason, because that just is not good for your body. Okay, food combining. So this is the last thing that you would be doing on your checklist. You've got everything, and by this point, you're eating so clean. This is not hard at all. But if you're still on step number 1, trying to eliminate sugar, don't try to skip right to food combining because it will make you crazy. So proteins with any kind of vegetable is just fine. Starches with any kind of vegetables, but you don't want to do starches and proteins together if you can avoid it. Fruit alone with nuts or fruit by itself. And then fats combined with anything is fine. So a little note about this, if you have blood sugar issues, you should definitely, if you're doing something, you're just doing beans one night or lentils, make sure that you combine it with a lot of fiber and a lot of fat to slow down the digestion of that starch. You don't want to be eating just starches by themselves. So the big takeaway here is protein and starches together don't really work, but protein with everything else works, but starches with everything else works, except for the fruit. The fruit stays by itself. So think about you have fruit for snacks with nuts, that's perfect. And as close to raw as possible, obviously, is always the best when able and safe. And so we're going back to giving the digestive tract a rest and letting it be able to heal and repair and getting the full value out of all of your food. And the reason why you want to food combine is to balance body chemistry, so things like pH and where you're distributing different nutrients in your body, but also because you're not able to digest the food as well if you combine them. So it creates a tax on the GI system, and you're not getting as much out of your food as you would if you didn't combine them. And this, I will definitely tell you, this is really hard to do, and it's not for everybody. So don't feel that you have to add this in, but if you are dealing with any kind of digestive issues or health issues, or you're concerned about health issues in the future, this would be the gold standard on your last check on your goal sheet. Do not get overwhelmed by this. Take this one step at a time, and just one goal at a time on that goal sheet, and eventually you'll get there. Food and emotion. So our food culturally is so tied into emotions, and typically this is where we get caught up. So if you find that you're still on step 1 or 2, eliminating sugar, eliminating carbohydrates, you might want to consider your emotional ties to food and why you're still eating poorly and haven't moved forward on that goal sheet. We often use food to self-medicate for emotional support. There's good reason why you go grab that pint of ice cream if you've had a really super bad day, or a breakup with somebody, or you got fired, whatever it is, it makes you feel good at the moment because it works on your morphine receptors in your brain. So that kind of gives you that sugar high, but the next morning you're really sorry that you ate it. And then you find yourself in this hamster wheel kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again. We often use food to relax at nighttime. It feels good at the moment. And peer pressure, if you're living with somebody that isn't interested in eating a whole foods diet or is kind of bullying you to not eat that way, remember that's their issue and nobody should pressure you into eating poorly. They should be supporting you. And they have their own, obviously, have their own problems. And just remind yourself of that and try to move past that on your own. Knowing your triggers is really important and trying to remove those triggers. So as you go through the next several months after this class, you're going to kind of go on this roller coaster where some weeks you're amazing and you're eating this amazing whole foods diet and you're so great. And then you go right off the rails and you're back to eating the stuff that you were eating before the whole foods class. You think I've totally wrecked it. Use that as a learning experience and try to think back on, what got you off the rails. And then the sooner you get back on the wagon and start eating well again, the easier it is. The longer you wait, the worse it is and harder it is to get back up and going again. So why do we, what are some of the triggers? It's there. So you're living with that person that's still buying, donuts and croissants or whatever, you want to eat, and it's sitting right in front of you. Get rid of it. Put it somewhere else. Don't lecture the person that you're living with about eating healthy, but you can simply ask them if they could put it away, or just put it away yourself. Put it somewhere where you're not going to see it. Stress is a huge trigger for so many of us. And if you can try to either do one of two things, how you perceive stress. So if you're always thinking, I'm so stressed out, I got so much stuff to do. Is it truly that you've got a lot of stress, or are you perceiving it as stress and can you perceive it differently? Or do you truly have a super, super stressful job and you're just stressed out all the time? And is there some way that you can interface with that, or meditation, or energetically balancing a little bit better, something that can help you interface with that stress? And the better your nutrition is, the more you're supporting your body to be able to interface with that daily stress that all of us have. Do you get really busy? And if you know, okay, I'm going to be, if let's say you're an accountant and it's tax season and you're going to be super, super busy, sort of try to plan ahead. Be realistic with yourself. I'm not going to have time to cook. So have some soup stocked away, get some stuff for salad, use shakes, find a takeout place for somebody that can make you food that's really, really healthy, that you don't have to worry about doing it during that time period. Anxiety and depression. So a poor diet creates both of these things. So you're back on that hamster wheel. You're eating because you're anxious or you're depressed, but then it makes you more anxious and depressed. So the more you're able to jump off that hamster wheel, the more often you can do it. It doesn't mean that you won't find yourself eating those cookies again or whatever it is, ice cream, but try to jump off more often. Then you're on the hamster wheel and you'll find eventually you'll just be off of it for good. And you may need extra help. This is often really hard to come to grips with, that I just need some extra help. And so going to a therapist, if it's an emotional attachment that you have to food, seeing a nutritionist who certainly would be more than happy to help you go through the steps and kind of hold your hand along the way. So many of us need that, and this is really huge to accomplish by yourself. And then some people just need a friend. Maybe you need somebody to do this with, print out the goal list, and get a friend and start doing it together, and that may help. Don't deny, just substitute bad for better. So this should be sustainable for you, and you need to be flexible. There's going to be days when you have pizza. There's going to be days when you go out to eat. There's going to be family that comes for the holidays, and you want to be able to enjoy all those things without constraint. So you don't want to go overboard, and the more often that you can substitute bad for better in those situations, the better off you're going to be. So try to do organic when you can. If, let's say, you really love fries and you do like a fry bar once a week or something, don't go out and get the fries, go do oven-baked fries. Desserts, switch them out for those healthier alternatives that don't have any sugar or have a low amount of sugar. Instead of doing takeout at the local Chinese restaurant once a week that's really, really horrible, go get organic frozen pizza or make some stuff on your own that you really love, like maybe your family loves pasta night. Do an organic pasta night and have more sauce when you do pasta. Whatever it is, just be flexible, have fun with this, and don't try to be super rigid where you're not going to stick with it for a lifetime. Okay, so here is your goal list for forever. This is it. This is the very last night. And at the very end, you want to start at the bottom of that list, eliminating any kind of food sensitivities that you might have and suspect. Once you've checked off all the other goals there, if you're still having problems, go to those food sensitivities. If you're still having problems, go to the phase 1 gut reconditioning and get more help if you need it. We are certainly happy to help anyone that needs more help. If you find that you've checked all those boxes or you just need help checking the boxes, feel free to go onto our website and book an appointment, and we'd be more than happy to help you. Go at your own pace. Everyone has a different situation. We are all individuals with individual lives, and don't compare yourself against anyone else. You have your own situation, and you know what you're capable of, and you know what you can't do right now. So pick the things on that goal sheet that you know that you can accomplish. So maybe it's not getting rid of sugar right now. Maybe it's just moving your body and drinking more water, and celebrate that. You've made a step to making yourself better, healthier for the long term, and that will motivate you to do better things in the future. Eat well to be well.